Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Town of Amherst Historic Preservation Commission meeting for April 9th, 2024. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mancuso,
Present.
Ampleman,
Present.
Swartz,
Here.
Waterman Culpa,
Here.
Hershey,
Here.
Kenzie,
Here.
Marinucci,
Here.
Fidel here, Quinn, Robshaw,
Here.
Howard. Okay.
Thank you. Our first item is the minutes approval for the March 12th, 2024 meeting. If you'd like to take a minute to review. And if nobody has any changes or amendments, do I have a motion to accept?
I'll make the motion.
First by Mr. Appleman, second by Mr. Hershey. All in favor?
Aye.
One abstention.
Ms. Waterman Culpa was absent from the meeting. So we have a vote of 5-0 with one abstention. Okay. Our first order of business under new business is an application for a local landmark designation at 4467 Main Street. We received the application from the Fruhoff Chateau homeowners and Jessica Black. Is anyone here from that group to make a presentation? I don't see Miss Black. That's okay.
Can I make two recommendations for the applicant to better their application when they come back the next time?
Sure.
Two things we're missing: an architectural discussion of the character-defining features of the building, as well as identifying a period of significance.
Thank you for that. I am going to make a motion to adjourn this. We have no further action right now. Can I get a second?
I'll second. Kate Waterman Culpa.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Okay. Item 2 is St. Mary's Mother House at 400 Mill Street. We received a certificate of appropriateness. I understand that the group is here to make a presentation, and I'd also like to remind the audience that this is not a public hearing, so we will not be taking public comment at this time. So we're here to listen to the presentation and move from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, members of the commission. My name is, just closer, is that better?
Thank you. Yes.
All right. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Charles Ritter. Myself, along with my partner, Tom Lyons, we're both attorneys at the law firm of Duke Holzman, and we represent St. Mary's Commons Associates. That is the entity that owns the property at 400 Mill Street. When I grew up, it was commonly referred to as the nunnery. I've heard it referred to as the Mother House. It was a convent, if I understand correctly, historically. It's now a senior residence facility. The reason that we have filed, on behalf of our client, an application for a certificate of appropriateness is because the building needs a new roof. Building needs a new roof. We have here this evening several people on behalf of the ownership group, as well as interested participants in the property. I'll just make a quick introduction. Mr. Lyons is the gentleman with the glasses sitting to my right. Next to him is Nick Kraus of the Heritage Consulting Group, who's got 20 plus years in historic properties, their renovation and their maintenance. We also have Tom Granville, a representative of the owner who's been before you before on prior applications. And we also have Gary Brown, our roofing consultant, I believe, who you're familiar with, along with an entire group of lovely young ladies who are former and or current residents of the property. I did have a chance to talk to a couple of them earlier, and I generally understand that they're in support of the building getting a new roof. I'm just going to do some introductory comments as by way of an overview, turn it over to Mr. Lyons, and then I think the person that you're probably going to be most interested to talk to is going to be Mr. Kraus, based on his background and experience in historic properties, the standards that apply to the upkeep, maintenance of those, in this case particularly relating to the roof. And if you have any questions for me, certainly ask. The reason that we're here and what we tried to do, and I see that you all have these large rubber band packets in front of you, is the property owners came before you before about an application to replace the roof. And in connection with that, there was a code provision in effect at the time that has since been amended. In our application that we put together, and why it's so substantial, is we sought to touch every single box. We checked every box under the applicable code standards, including the Secretary of Interior standards, and presented to you not only our narrative presentation, but photographs along with an affidavit from Mr. Kraus that documents his credentials as well as his professional opinion regarding this particular property and the renovation that we're proposing. The one element that I want to highlight before I hand this over is that this property, the standard that applies under the new code, sections 121-7 and 121-8, there's a principle of compatibility, and the general concept is the historic features of the property should be altered as little as possible. That's the goal and the standard that we set out to meet in that application. If you look at the back of the room, and I invite questions, comments later, or to walk up and take a look at it, we have a demonstration board that has the proposed simulated or synthetic slate material that would be installed at the property. Next to it on the board, where you can see some plywood exposed, those are samples of existing slates that have fallen off the roof. So there is and has been a bit of a hazard relating to slate because it deteriorates over time with weather and the freeze and the thaw cycle, and it's just naturally a brittle material. You're not going to go out and find a manufacturer who's going to give you a warranty on natural slate material because it's stone. It needs to be maintained and replaced. The synthetic material we have proposed is the material that the Department of Interior and many agencies across the United States who are in the business of preserving the integrity of historic buildings have approved. In particular, the EcoStar system, which is what we have, is one that Mr. Kraus can explain has been used in similar instances. Real quickly, I'm just going to, as far as my comments, I just want to point out that Mr. Kraus has provided an affidavit. It's 3 pages long, and he's identified from his review of your code as well as the Secretary, the federal standard that he's familiar with. I always get tongue-tied on that one, I'm sorry. That this material and our proposed project is consistent with the types of standards that organizations similar to yourself have approved in the past. He provides an opinion that it is the opinion of the Heritage Consulting Group that not only is the existing slate roof deteriorated beyond repair, and that the proposed synthetic slate that we have on the board will closely match the historic slate and return it to a uniform appearance, but also that in their professional opinion, the proposed scope of work is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. That's on page 2 of his report, which is attached as Exhibit 2 to his affidavit. The other item that I would highlight for you or draw your attention to, at tab 2 to his affidavit, there's a page captioned comparable projects within New York State. These are projects that Mr. Kraus is familiar with based on his professional work on behalf of as a consultant to preserve historic buildings. He specifically points out structures that have used the EcoStar system that we're proposing. And take a look at page 15. There's an example of a railroad type station building where there are large expanses of exposed slate. A little different than the situation here. That's a synthetic slate that, in the visual there, and he will explain this, is indistinguishable from real slate material when it's installed. I've taken a little longer than I had planned. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lyons to go through some of your applicable code provisions, and then to Mr. Kraus. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Thomas Lyons. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Duke, Holzman, Fodiatis, and Gressens. We're here on behalf of the ownership. I'm going to try to keep my portion of this presentation to simply looking at the actual standards that are in your newly amended code as it relates to this project and under the current standards. So importantly, the amendments went into effect in December of 2023, and they now provide very clearly 8 enumerated factors, which we discuss between pages 19 and 25 of our written submission. Those 8 factors, in by and large, and this is an overview, but generally, the idea is not that a building cannot be changed. It is simply that you want to maintain the historical aesthetic of the building. In that vein, I want to direct you to a couple points in the written submission. First, and this is on page 6 of our submission, I point out that there was a historical survey done by the town itself. By the lack of a date stamp, I can't give you the exact date, but by all accounts.
Can you say which tab it's under?
So it's actually just the first, the large bulk. It's the letter that's right on top of it, and it's page 6 of that letter. There's a large block quote in the beginning, in the section, middle section, that starts with the words Area 7.
I read it many times today. I don't need to read it again.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So this historical survey was conducted by the town of Amherst itself. By all accounts, it appears to have been done in or around the early 2000s, prior to the ownership interest in this property changing to my client. The reason I say that is because it references it as being owned by the municipality. So with that in mind, when this property was originally designated as a historical landmark, that survey itself pointed out what the town designated as the historical characteristics of the building. Quite tellingly, that building is described as being a Gothic Revival architecture structure. It's stone and mason work. It has the large parapets. It has the towers. It has the pointed windows. It has all of the beautiful things that make it what it is. Tellingly, though, the roof and the material of it was not mentioned as a defining historical characteristic of this structure. By direct contrast, another historical building in Area 7, also discussed, is the Park Country Club. By contrast, I emphasize that that was very specifically called out as the slate roof being a historical aspect of that building. In fact, one of the primary, because our building stands at almost 4.5 stories tall. The roof at any point is only going to be visible from street level, whereas Park Country Club, obviously, the roof, and there's an image of this right in our submission. If you flip 2 pages further down, it's page 8. There's a side-by-side comparison of the Park Country Club structure to our structure. Park Country Club structure's slate roof obviously extends nearly down to street level and is one of the single most visible characteristics of that building. So, with that in mind, when I turn it over to Mr. Kraus, you're going to hear him talk about the NPS standards and specifically other historical projects that have been done across the country, New York State, and everywhere, and how the number of defining characteristics from a historical standpoint is singly the most important thing that is looked at. So, with that in mind, I now turn to the actual 8 enumerated factors here, right? The 8 enumerated factors in your code, section 121-8, subparagraph B and subparagraph C, go through maintaining the historical aesthetic of the building. And in that regard, I can answer any direct questions you have about those, but our submission, again, in pages 19 to 25, addresses each one of those things. And most importantly, if you observe the mock-ups at the back of the room, bearing in mind that you are going to be, at best, observing this from nearly 40 feet down at any given point at a downward angle. And conveniently here, you're actually looking at it in a much more on-the-face viewpoint. And it has all of the historical aesthetic trademarks of actual real slate. It has the semi-uneven patterns, it has the color patterns, and what you're going to see and hear from Mr. Kraus is that when it comes to the historical aesthetic of maintaining slate roofs with a slate synthetic, this product, the EcoStar that we are proposing, is the standard that has been used all across the country. With that, pending any questions that you may have about the actual 8 enumerated criteria, again, I would refer you back to then pages specifically 21 to 25 of our written submission for each one of those being addressed. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Mr. Kraus, and he can talk a little bit more extensively about the historical background that he brings to this, as well as what the qualifications of this structure and the project are from the historical perspective.
Do you want to answer questions now, or just allow them to finish their presentation?
Yeah, I think we could, yeah, I think we can let Mr. Kraus present, unless anyone has anything specifically they'd like to ask.
I do know where that report is from. It's from 2011. It's the updated recognizance survey. I hope Mr. Kraus knows what that means, so that can, you know, be a framework for his response coming up here, because it's not an intensive level survey. It's a recon survey. It was a 5-sentence bullet of the building because it's a recognizance survey. Again, not an intensive level survey. And for the slate roof not to have been identified, there's 0 problems with that. Just because it was identified in the 5-sentence blurb about the Park Club building does not make the roof of St. Mary's insignificant. In fact, the National Register nomination clearly identifies multiple times the roof and it being slate. So just so that you have that framework while you're speaking, to identify, we know where that page came from that you identified. And I personally don't find that to be any relevance as significant here, because it was not an intensive level survey, and the National Register nomination based on Kathy Howe from the New York State SHPO's actual historic structures report, that's where almost word for word, her structure report was transferred to the National Register nomination, identifies the roof as historic. So to lay that framework of where we're coming from as a commission and what we've based our decision on thus far. So it seems like you based your entire argument this evening on that piece of evidence where you claimed in the footnotes you did not know who wrote it, you did not know what year it was done, and you did not know where it came from. To me, it means absolutely nothing. It's a 5-sentence blurb in a recon survey.
Absolutely, and thank you, member of the commission. I appreciate that. I will point that it is not the single piece of evidence that we rely on here. It was simply demonstrative of the town itself at a certain point identifying various historic characteristics of this structure and of other comparable structures in the town. As you're going to hear again from Mr. Kraus in significantly more detail, the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior standards, and specifically I will direct you then to Exhibit Tab 5, that is Brief 32 from the National Park Service and the Secretary of the Interior. That talks about, as I mentioned, it is the numerosity of historical factors that comes into play. In that brief itself, and again, Mr. Kraus will address this, the one example where they did not approve the use of a synthetic slate was when it was the single defining characteristic of that building, and it was a 2-story structure where the roof again extended nearly down to street level. In each of the other examples provided there, they approved the use of synthetic slate, and again, it's an example and it's a material and a product designed specifically to preserve the historical aesthetic and replace slate. So, as Mr. Kraus will talk about, again, the slate not being mentioned in the town survey is not the single point. It is simply demonstrative of the fact that it is by far and away not the only factor and characteristic that defines this building as historical in nature.
Norm Hershey here. I have to jump in at this point because we're already objecting to the presentation. We haven't even heard from Mr. Kraus yet regarding the suitability of using synthetic slate as a replacement for slate on historic buildings. And I think we need to hear that. And I'll have more to say later.
Thank you. So I will turn it over to Mr. Kraus at this point, and he can provide you his background and more specification on this. Thank you.
All right, good evening, Commission and Commissioners. Appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak in front of you. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nick Kraus. I'm Vice President of Heritage Consulting Group. Heritage Consulting Group has been around since 1982, and I've been with Heritage since 2007. We are a historic preservation consulting firm. Our typical scope of work is historic rehabilitation projects focused on historic tax credits. We are a board member of the Historic Tax Credit Coalition, speak in many conferences, including the Novogradac Historic Tax Credit Conference. We've, since 1982, completed over thousands of projects, thousands of historic projects, and currently have over 300 right now on our books. As far as myself, I have a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Buffalo, as well as a master's in science and historic preservation from the University of Pennsylvania. I meet the Secretary of Interior's professional qualification standards in architectural history, which is codified as 36 CFR 61 in the Federal Register. And just as a background of a couple local projects we're working on, the Trico plant number 1. We worked on Richardson Olmsted on the original conversion into the Hotel Henry, and we're currently working on the rehabilitation of the Aldrich and Ray factory at 1491 Niagara Street in Buffalo. As we know, the quick background on the building, built in 1926, Dietl and Wade Architects. So, an architect-designed building. Obviously, it's a good composition of Gothic Revival architecture. And then in 2003, converted to affordable senior housing, as you can see in the audience today, those who have lived and currently live at the building. So as we're talking about today and is in the application, the project before us is to replace the deteriorated slate tile roofing with an EcoStar slate in a color blend of Scottish Blend and Napa Blend. It's a polymer replacement slate, and it's a custom blend to match the existing tile. It has been designed specifically to match the size, texture, and visual character of existing slate. There's a report done by Mr. Brown documenting the existing slate roof, and we've based our review on that report. Based on what we saw in the report, it appears that the existing slate roof is in poor condition. It has a splotchy, inconsistent appearance, which would not have matched what would have been there historically, especially as a architect-designed building. A splotchy appearance on a roof would have been sloppy and would not have been something that would have been accepted. Additionally, the roof is almost 100 years old, which is about the standard lifetime for a well-maintained slate roof. As you can understand, with weather issues, you get freeze and thaw getting into it. And as you can see from the numerous repairs and splotchy appearance, when you have any slates break, you end up breaking multiple more trying to replace those slates. So I think that's based on Mr. Brown's report. The roof is no longer repairable, and I think the other thing to emphasize is that this building, during the period of significance, had a mission, and the mission was not historic preservation. So repairs that were taken were not focused on a preservation strategy, but on continued use and keeping water out of the building. So I think it's important to understand how we got to where we are today, along with continued maintenance of the building through this period to where the current roof is at its functional lifespan. The proposed project is to replace this with the EcoStar polymer synthetic roof, as we see in the back here with the mock-up of the custom blend. And it's designed to match the color and the lay pattern, really, of the blend that we see today. Certainly not in the splotchy appearance. It'd be a more regular appearance, but to try to match what we have up there today. specifically the goal of this replacement is to not only make the building watertight and preserve it, which is going to lead to the preservation of this historic resource, and provide a long-term durable solution, but also to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. With that, I wanted to turn to the standards that we're talking about today, as far as what the certificate of appropriateness is based on per the code, as previously discussed, and as we typically interpret professionally when dealing with local preservation commissions, HARBs, state historic preservation offices, and the National Park Service. And so what we're talking about today is the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. These were first published in 1977, and they're codified in 36 CFR 67 of the Federal Register. And I think it's important to note that these standards, as well as the guidance provided by the National Park Service to interpret them, are the professional North Star in terms of historic preservation. These are the standards that are utilized throughout the country at all levels of government to review projects and ensure that the work meets the standards and is historically appropriate. And beyond that, these are the standards that are used in historic tax credit projects, which are the most common type of historic preservation throughout the country. It's the greatest incentive that has occurred for historic preservation in the country, and it's the largest carrot that allows us to rehabilitate historic buildings and keep them around. I think it's important for us to understand what the standards are and what they're not. These are the standards for rehabilitation. These are not preservation standards. These are not restoration standards. The National Park Service has issued those. Those are not the standards we're talking about today. We're not talking about the Darwin Martin House, which has been preserved and restored to a much higher and albeit beautiful character at a significant effort. We're also not talking about Independence Hall. We're talking about the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And as you can see on page 8 of our report, I believe that's tab 2.
Mr. Krause's affidavit is separate from the main bulk submission.
Rehabilitation is the act of making possible a compatible use for a property through repair, alteration, additions, while preserving those portions that convey its historical, cultural, or architectural values. The rehabilitation standards acknowledge need to alter or add to a historic building to meet continuing or new uses while retaining the building's historic character. Retaining the building's historic character does not mean preserving or restoring what may be or may has been lost. And I think that's important to recognize.
Mr. Kraus, could you reference where you're reading from, please?
Sure, this is on page 8. It's the Heritage Report. It should be in tab 2.
Tab 2.
And then anything else I'll be referencing will be in this report. And I'll try to give a page as I reference. If I don't, please feel free to ask if you can't find it. The next piece of guidance I'd like to talk about is another one talking about and interpreting the rehabilitation standards, and this is also on page 8 at the bottom under Summary of Guidance 3, and this is Special Directive 90-2. And if you go onto page 9, at the start of page 9, top paragraph, at the bottom, the last sentence says, further, the standards shall be applied taking into consideration the economic and technical feasibility of each project. Again, this is the guidance provided by the federal government about their standards. These are the standards that we use to interpret projects that are being rehabilitated. continuing on, the National Park Service does issue guidance as far as how to interpret their standards. The standards are 10 subjective standards that don't specifically mention specific treatments. So they're a guideline as to how treatments can be appropriate or inappropriate for rehabilitation of a certified historic structure. But they don't give you a you shall not. It's subjective. Based on that, the National Park Service has issued significant guidance as to how to interpret the standards. And the general guidance on the Secretary of Standards for Rehabilitation are their illustrated guidelines. And so guidance 4 that we have here is from their illustrated guidelines, and this is about roofs. And as you'll see, it does say the recommended treatment is in kind. That is a recommended treatment. That said, it also takes into account the reality of projects, specifically rehabilitation projects, where replacement with historic materials is not always feasible economically or technically. And you can see, again, at the middle of page 9, I've highlighted in the report, if using the same kind of material is not technically or economically feasible, then a compatible substitute material may be considered. And again, we're not talking about previous options that may have been, asphalt, shingle, or some other replacement that was not a good match. We're talking about polymer synthetic EcoStar, which is something that is designed specifically so that you cannot tell from distance that this product is not slate. Moving on to the bottom of page 9, we move into what we have as Summary of Guidance 5, which is ITS 32, interpreting the standards. So I just wanted to clarify, this is not a preservation brief. Preservation briefs are their own group of documents that are used to interpret the standards. The National Park Service, beyond those, has issued numerous pieces of guidance called Interpreting the Standards, which further go to how their reviewers utilize these standards. And these are issued to allow practitioners to make informed judgments as to how the National Park Service believes these standards should be interpreted. And that's what ITS number 32 is. It's specific guidance for slate roof treatments. And this is all publicly available. This is online. As Mr. Lyons mentioned, in our report, we lay out application 2 and application 3. Just to clarify, application 1 is garden apartment complexes, 2-story red brick, I believe 1930s or 40s garden apartment complexes with hipped roofs that are clad in slate. It was determined that that is not a compatible treatment to replace because, in fact, the hipped slate roof is the character defining feature of that building. So we did not include that because that is not, I would say, consistent with the fact pattern we have for St. Mary's. So, but that is available publicly online. So the two comps we do have, application 2 and application 3. Application 2 is at the middle of your page. Application 3 is at the bottom. And again, this is taken directly from ITS 32, published by the National Park Service. Application 2, you can see, is a higher style building with a mansard slate roof. In the lettering and in the write-up from National Park Service, it's a little tough to see in the middle, but that does give you the outline of how they looked at this. I added in the text above that for application 2, the roof is only one of many decorative elements making up the primary facade and not the sole defining feature of the building. Replacing the slate with a polymer-based substitute slate was an acceptable alternative. While not an exact fact pattern, this is very similar to what we're looking at St. Mary's. Application 3, below, is a large former brewery building that was rehabilitated. As you'll see, in the writing from ITS 32, this was looked at due to its height and visibility. And it does indicate that the towers and turrets and monitors are clearly a distinctive and prominent feature. But because of the massive scale and height of the building, it can only be viewed at a considerable distance. Again, as any of you may have seen looking at sightline studies, when something is right in your face, if we walk up to that, we can tell the difference. From 10 feet, we can tell less of the difference. From 20 feet, we can tell less of the difference. From 40 feet up above us, looking straight up, we can't see the roof. We have to step back. Every time you get a better view, you're further back, and you have less of the roof perception in your eye. Remember, we're viewing this from typically the right-of-way, the public right-of-way would be how this would look. But even if we're not going to use that as the standard, we're using the standard as where you can stand and look at this. Not going on the roof, not a drone, not a plane, but from where you can stand and look at it. And so that's what application 3 is in reference to. And again, both of these were approved with replacements, though I will say application 3 was actually approved for replacement with matching asphalt shingles, which we are not proposing. We are proposing the polymer EcoStar. Moving on to page 11 of the report, the next summary of guidance is Preservation Brief 16, which was just updated. And again, the National Park Service just had a webinar on the use of substitute materials. It's become understood that there is a need to use substitute materials, especially over recent years as the cost of labor and materials has skyrocketed. We've seen numerous projects die on the vine because they just can't be afforded. And we've seen the National Park Service understand the need to use alternative matching materials, not just alternative materials, but good quality matching materials that are visually indistinguishable, understanding that these are necessary to maintain certified historic structures, such as what we have here. And in Preservation Brief 16, it does say, the standards also purposely recognize that flexibility may sometimes be needed when it comes to new and replacement materials as part of a historic rehabilitation project. Substitute materials that closely match the visual and physical properties of historic materials can be successfully used on many rehabilitation projects in ways that are consistent with the standards, which is what we're looking for here. Again, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation are the standards that are used to determine whether a scope of work item is consistent. And I'd just like to reference from our experience on numerous projects, typical alternative materials that are every day approved for projects like this at local, state, and national levels. These include aluminum windows, replacing steel windows and wood windows that are deteriorated, aluminum and composite storefronts, GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete for terracotta. We actually have a PNC tower building in Cincinnati. It's a tower, it's a sister building to the Woolworth building. It was designed by Cass Gilbert in, I believe, 1912. And its terracotta has significantly failed due to water getting into the tiebacks. And we have National Park Service approval to replace those terracotta tiles with closely matching GFRC tiles. We also often get approval for GFRC or FIPON for replacing exterior ornamentation that may be damaged or missing, including cornices. Many of the buildings you see today that have cornices didn't have them 50 years ago because they either fell or they were falling or they were déclassé in terms of style. If we ever see this happen at the Ellicott Square building, my guess is it's going to be GFRC or FIPON that goes back up. We could only hope. On the interior, which I know isn't the purview of this commission, but just as a reference, we don't go back with flat plaster walls. We go back with gypsum board. It looks the same. It's economical. It makes projects work. We go back with LVT flooring that matches wood flooring when wood flooring doesn't exist. It makes a project work, and it meets the standards. With that, I'd like to just move into some comp projects. Most of these are in New York State. The last one is in Washington, but I thought it was a really great example, so I would have been remiss to not include it. Again, we have a wide breadth of working on these projects. This is what we do. We work throughout the country. And these projects, especially and significantly the first one, is an approved historic tax credit project in the state of New York, approved by the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service. It has received Part 3. They have received their state and federal historic tax credits. It's fully approved. And before I get into that, I just wanted to mention an anecdote that I had. One of my colleagues, who's not here, Linda Santoro, used to be a reviewer at the Massachusetts Historic Commission, the State Historic Preservation Office for the state of Massachusetts, pardon me, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I don't want any natives to get mad at me. It's a state with, as you can imagine, lots and lots of historic resources and many, many slate roofs. Their National Park Service reviewer was Jo Ellen Hensley, who provided their office training every year on the standards, on how to interpret it. I spoke to Linda about it, and I said, what did Jo Ellen tell you? And she said, Jo Ellen referenced Brief 32 in her presentation. And what Linda told me was that MHC, in coordination with the National Park Service, as everything first goes through the State Historic Preservation Office and then reviewed at the National Park Service, expressly approved simulated slate on nearly all projects, understanding that it was a good match, it was affordable, and it was something necessary in today's climate to make work. Again, they reviewed the product. They made sure it was a good visual match. But their concern was not about the material. It was about the aesthetic. So I'd like to talk about the first comp project, again on page 13. This is a house located at 257 Liberty Street in Newburgh, New York. It's in the National Register listed East End Historic District. And again, this was a historic tax credit project. You can see the pre-rehab condition on the left, where the building is vacant and abandoned for numerous years. And on the right, the completed project, Part 3 in hand, state historic tax credits in hand, federal historic tax credits in hand. The project used EchoStar replacement slate. This was approved in an amendment through the National Park Service. They had no conditions or comments about it. And beyond what we have here, this was actually more of a difficult match because it had a pattern to it. It was more of a design statement because it was a two-story house and very visible. You could get very close to this and see it. It had to be right. And the Park Service determined that it was, and it met the standards. The second comp that I have is the Theodore Roosevelt Historic Site downtown. Specifically the Carriage House. And this building also, as you can see a picture of it on photo 5, utilized EchoStar, and this building would have required approval to meet the standards through the Section 106 review process of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Other buildings that have used the EchoStar slate include Townsend Hall at UB, again a state building that would have necessarily required SHPO approval. Then below, photo 6 on page 14 at the left, this is the Corn Exchange building in Harlem, New York. This utilized EchoStar replacement slate, and this was approved by the New York City Landmark Preservation Commission. To the right is the Hanlon Beach State Park bathhouse. Again, being a state building, this would have required SHPO approval. And this one you can see is a lower building. It's more visible there, though, again, it's more of a utilitarian building. While it's visible, it's somewhat different than what we have here. And then the final comp that I mentioned earlier that is not in New York State, but I think really does a great example of showing why the EchoStar synthetic product is a good match to historic slate. Again, on page 15, this is the National Register listed Ellensburg, Washington Northern Pacific Railroad Station. As you can see in photos 8 and 9 below, the building was abandoned. In 8, you can see there's some patches up there of the roof. It's clearly in poor condition. And next to it is almost a similar photo showing the replaced roof with the EchoStar product. And photo 10, I think, is the best to show what we're proposing here. Again, not specific to our building here, but for reference for the product and why it meets the standards. I think if you look at photo 10, look at the detailing, look at the lay pattern, it looks like slate. I would venture to guess that those looking at this who may not be privy to us speaking about it would not know the difference, which essentially is what we're looking to meet when we utilize the rehabilitation standards. Based on our understanding of the applicable laws and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, including NPS guidance and past precedent on comparable projects approved by municipal historic commissions, New York State SHPO, other SHPOs, and the National Park Service, it is our professional opinion at Heritage Consulting Group, as professionals under 36 CFR 61, that the proposed synthetic slate roofing is an acceptable replacement product as it relates to this individual project, and that this scope of work is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. This proposed scope is consistent with what we often see at the National Park Service and is the right thing to do for this building. It will not be noticeable as a different product. It will be observed from a minimum of 40 feet. And if we look back to the period of significance, in fact, and how the National Park Service typically looks at this, they typically judge these from the public right-of-way, which could be interpreted differently since there is now a public park. But in the period of significance, the public right-of-way was the street. That was how this building was intended to be publicly viewed. From that distance, there's no way that you can tell a difference. The only difference you'll be able to tell is that it won't look patchy and deteriorated like what we have today. Again, it will not alter any visual character of the roof or its architectural style. And with that, we believe it's the proper replacement roofing material for this specific project. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions along with the project team. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that, yeah.
If I may, members of the commission, I'll try to close the loop really quickly now, having heard the actual in-depth historical standards from the subject matter expert, quite frankly. The 8 enumerated factors in the code, section 121-8. As you'll see in the first section, and again, I'll refer you, this is on page 21 and forward, the first 3 factors are considerations, and each one of those, I'll note first, the first 2 don't simply say that no alterations whatsoever can be made. Rather, they say that alterations should be kept to a minimum in compatibility standards. That is then the next 5 sections that are enumerated under subsection C of 121-8. And each and every one of those deals with the visual aesthetic of the property. As you've just heard, and as the NPS standards state, the synthetic EchoStar product that we are proposing to use, and again, this is where I'll emphasize what we're proposing is a mixed blend of the synthetic tile to match what everyone in this room recognizes to have been the pattern on that building for as long as, frankly, most of us have seen it. There are historical suggestions that it may have been simply a slate monolithic gray roof, but that is where, as Mr. Kraus has said in his report, either option will more than meet the standard from a historical preservation standpoint and historical rehabilitation standpoint. So what we are proposing, and what we're asking this commission to vote on and approve tonight, is the certificate of appropriateness with regard to the custom mixed blend to match what has existed on that property for what most of us in this room have recognized it to be. Pending any further questions, then I'll turn it.
You think this is the second roof on this building, in your professional opinion? I'll ask Mr. Kraus. I never said that. Okay, thank you.
So ma'am, what we're saying is there are historical photos that suggest that by coloration, and again, the toning on them obviously being historical photos is less than clear, there seems to be a possibility that it may have been the monolithic gray. However,
Black and white photos?
no ma'am, actually, I will direct you to my submission. It is the second page of the submission.
I asked if they were black and white photos, and so he's going to identify where they are in the report.
Correct. So it's the second page of my submission, again, the large packet. If you flip to the second page, there are two historical photos that were pulled from one of the town's websites of this location. They're in I'll submit to you, they're in something of a sepia tone almost. So it's a little difficult to tell the exact coloration, but these being the historical photos, again, there's a suggestion that it may have been a monolithic. But as far as the historical viewpoint of anyone that's in this room today, frankly, we all recognize this building to have that mixed coloration pattern. And that's why what we are proposing and what we're asking you to approve is the custom blend mixed coloration to restore it to a new synthetic slate that will be, from all accounts, matching what is currently there.
Actually, what you said in your document was that there were patches that were inappropriately done, and I think you reiterated that during your presentation. And therefore, those wouldn't be historic.
What we put in our submission was our client only took ownership of this structure in 2003. They took ownership of it from the municipality itself, and prior to that point, it had been owned privately by the nunnery itself. We don't have the records ourselves as to what was or wasn't done in the first roughly 60 to 70 years of its actual existence. What we do have record of is what we've done since. We've done appropriate repairs since we took ownership, but over the original 60 to 70 years that this structure was originally owned by the nunnery, as well, or sorry, the convent rather, and then by the municipality itself, it appears that there had been patchwork repairs done. We can't say with certainty whether or not that was done by a professional or otherwise, but what we can say is that the result has been the patchwork coloration on the roof, as most of everybody in the room can recognize it to be currently.
So then can you identify on your samples that you've brought tonight, you have the original slate that was either fallen off the building or removed from the northern side of the building when it was done without a permit, and then you have the EchoStar product. So let's look at, say, the brown sample over there. Now, what you've identified in your document is the brown being the, I think someone called it, was it Stachy? Was inappropriate repair. So why would you be proposing that in your sample this evening?
Well, and again, so I will clarify. We don't identify it as an inappropriate repair. What we say is that there were patchwork repairs done that didn't match the coloration of the original roof if it was a monolithic gray roof. The result, over a period of now almost a century, the original 70-ish or more years being not under our ownership, was the coloration variation that has existed on it for the better part of 60 years now. So what we pointed out, and again, now I'll direct you back to our submission, there are a number of color photographs that appear from pages 3 forward, and those photographs were taken over a period of years, some of which at the time that my client took ownership of the property and it was being rehabilitated, as well as some of them taken as recently as only 2 years ago. And what is visible, albeit you can't see the texture and you can't see the pattern of it from nearly 40 plus feet down, what you can see is a general variation of color. It is not simply the monolithic color. That's why, again, what we're asking the commission to vote on and approve is the mixed coloration to keep what has been, for the better part of everyone's memory, the historical view and aesthetic of this roof.
I'm going to ask Gary and Nick to weigh in on this. Do you think this is original slate that's on the building now, except for where it has been repaired according to the Secretary of Interior standards to infill slate that has deteriorated?
Mr. Brown, could you actually just come up to the mic just to speak into it? Thanks.
yes, I think a lot of what you're seeing is repairs, and what happens with roofers is they'll take whatever's in the shop, they'll use the patch. On the other hand, finding new slate to match existing slate is extremely difficult, especially when it's 60 years old or 70 years old.
Did you do that when you bid this project in slate? Did you find contractors that were going to give you a similar appearance in natural slate to what is on the building currently?
We talked about a monolithic, it wasn't going to be a modeled slate product.
Which product was that? Because I don't remember it being monolithic.
Meaning the
Specs.
the specs,
the specifications,
the
yeah.
slate, we had a color, I believe, or we did not ask for a modeled version.
It would have been a approval process, a submittal in the approval process, right?
And I don't want to speak out of turn, but the same with this. Like, we'd like to approve the EcoStar and then maybe give you guys some choices of colors. If you want, you can see we have a monolithic board in front. I don't know if you guys have seen this one here. It's all gray. You can see the greenish color on the other board kind of matches what's there now. So if you'd like to see that, I think we're open to, we want to use this product because of the reasons stated before.
Correct. And to Mr. Brown's point, to the extent that the commission finds that the monolithic slate gray is what is more historically accurate from the commission's perspective, we are not opposed to that coloration. What we are proposing, as I've mentioned several times now, is that we are proposing to match what is currently and has been for a long time existing on the property. So the application before you is for the use of the synthetic EcoStar product. We are proposing the mixed custom blend. To the extent that the commission would rather approve this evening the use of the slate monolithic gray, we are also open to that.
Just one other point so you're not confused. The existing slate is a 10-inch width. We can get that. This is just what they gave us to make the mock-ups, but we can match that same width that you see on the old slate.
It would be 10 by 10, or will it be 10 by 20?
Like 20, yeah.
That I'm not sure of, but I know
The exposure
we
is
can
to
get
be a
the
certain,
same
sure.
10-inch.
The exposure of the actual roofing material itself will match what is on the structure.
Yeah. Okay. Norm Hershey here. Now, that was my one question that Gary just answered, is the size of the shingle there to match more or less what's there now. Previously, I asked to speak. I listened to Nick, and Nick gave a very good presentation on how this commission can accept an alternative material and not feel like we're not representing our duties as a historic commission. We've got indications in prior meetings and seminars that local trainers mentioned that material substitution is used often on these historic buildings. Nick presented 101 different places of significance where that's done. And I want to recognize all the residents here being concerned about the roof as it is. We've been dealing with this for over a year, and we're focusing on a lot of small things, and I think we need to go forward. We've got a building sitting there of a tremendous value, and I don't think we want to be the... I see no reason where this standing of this commission is going to be diminished by us going with EcoStar synthetic slate. So I'd like to get going.
Norm, can I ask you a question? Based on what?
Based on everything Nick presented. Why are we focusing on a material? You've got a building that was a convent that's its historic significance to me. Those buildings don't exist anymore for that purpose. And it's been repurposed. Excuse me.
I can't hear you because there's constant
Okay,
interruption
all
by
right.
gallery.
Okay, I'll go back and repeat that.
Sure.
That building's significance, its character, as we heard in a webinar, involves more than the physical structure. The building's use is just as much of a character-defining element as the structure. So we're standing, and to me, that building represents more in its historic use. And I don't see the community coming around, people in the community, which we represent, going around looking at these historic buildings and standing in awe and looking at that slate roof and saying, isn't it a wonder that that got replaced? They hardly know the building is there from a historic standpoint. And we've got residents here that depend on that owner providing them a place to live at a very reasonable rent, from what I understand. So I don't see how we should be hung up on, in an absolute sense, of using slate forever, and I can't elaborate anymore. Thank
So
you.
if I can try to synthesize what you said so I understand. So the two main reasons are that the historical significance is its use, not its architecture, and that it's an economic factor. Can we just ask, I'm just asking Norm to clarify for me.
I will stand on the fact that we're not even altering the architectural element in that manner, as presented by Nick. But I feel the most important part of that building, look how much money was spent to build that. The church financed that in a time when churches were in a position to do that. And its use was, I believe, as a convent. Those buildings don't exist anymore. Maybe they've been moved to another location, but that to me is part of the history. So, and I'm not going to give up on the architectural element, saying we've just thrown up our hands and saying we can't even match that. My only other comment on the architectural part is obviously slate's fire resistant, and I don't know what this product is.
It actually is fire resistant. It's a Class A fire resistant
synthetic
material.
slate.
Yeah. No, not the synthetic. Natural slate is a Class A fire resistant.
I would expect, so, okay.
Yeah.
And how about this material?
And also very, very energy efficient because it's a very dense material that can keep heat in or out. So,
What's the fire resistance of this material? Is it code suitable?
Yeah. Mr. Hershey, if I may, so the product is code suitable, absolutely, with regard to fire resistance. Thank you. If I may address one other point that was raised there, to simply refocus slightly, this town's code, as amended in December, specifically and very expressly incorporates the NPS standards. And as Mr. Kraus said, the NPS standards, and as Mr. Kraus had indicated, either of the color patterns that we are suggesting of the EchoStar product satisfy those standards. They also, as I've set forth in our submission, satisfy the code requirements as put forward by this town. So that's where, again, pending any comments or questions regarding those specific enumerated factors, I would ask that the commission vote and approve this proposed project.
okay, thank you. We're going to keep discussing up here. So I want to address what Norm said about economics. So that's not actually part of this discussion. That would be an economic hardship application. So economics cannot be considered at this level of discussion because unfortunately we are back at a certificate of appropriateness stage for the exact same material that we've previously seen. So the applicant hasn't progressed their plans forward. We've just gone back to the same thing that we've already seen. And I'd like to address then the historic structures report as well as the National Register nomination. And in fact, architecture was the main reason for this building to be nominated to the state and national registers of historic places. So although I also feel that it's important as a religious structure, that it was part of the package, but it definitely wasn't the only part of that nomination. The architecture was very, very strong. As far as going to the interpretation 32 for slate roof treatments, I'd like to read the bottom of the ITS that was done in July of 2023. The resulting determinations based on the Secretary of Interior Standards of Rehabilitation are not necessarily applicable beyond the unique facts and circumstances of each particular case. That is true of every single work product or example that Mr. Kraus gave us this evening. There are unique factors that go into every single case, and the NPS absolutely recognizes that. I'd like to know, Mr. Kraus, when was the last time you were at the building?
I'm not sure why that's applicable here.
Because I don't think you've actually been to the building. Have you been to the building? Because all of your images are from Google, and you are the case you are making in these documents, keep talking to the building as from Mill Street. No one interacts with this building from Mill Street. They drive by it, but they enter a corridor, a pathway, and they intentionally can go around the entire building. It is part of the Amherst State Park setting. It was the same property as now is the Amherst State Park, and the way that you're describing it, being viewed 40 feet up with your neck creaked, that's like big city mentality. This is a park setting. You can see it from a mile away in this park. You can see it right up close because there's a sidewalk that goes around the entire building, or there's a pathway that goes around the entire building that's used vehicularly. So it's the picture you paint in this document is not reality. So I just wanted to make that statement. I am also 36 CFR 61 certified in 3 categories: architectural history, architecture, and historical architecture. I meet the qualifications of all of those. So I admire your credentials, but I don't want everyone to think that you're the only person in the room that meets those credentials, because I do have a strong opinion about what's going on here. And I feel like the narrative was crafted in a way to get to an end result, much like a sell sheet for a product like EchoStar. I've noticed the warranty information that we've gone through with Gary Brown for many, many months. It's, I believe, a 50-year transferable warranty, and it was odd to me that it mentioned that even at the sale of the building, it would be transferable as a point that was put in your document. But 50-year transferable warranty on a product that hasn't existed for 50 years is suspect to many of us in the historic preservation world. So, I mean, if you want, we can go through their letter point by point. I have a lot of markups for what was submitted here for this evening. I don't know how you want to handle that.
Ms. Copel, could I answer a question that you just raised?
Sure.
You asked, how can we trust a 50-year warranty, and why does that even show up in this presentation? You can blame the lawyer for that, because that's me. And I asked, because I saw it discussed at your prior sessions, I had to look at the YouTube recordings, and I saw what was submitted and how you decided. And I didn't mention this at the outset, I should have. We put together this package. It's not a sell sheet for EchoStar. EchoStar didn't participate in this. My office worked with Mr. Kraus on it. And the purpose of this was to comply with the guidelines in the town code and specifically address the concerns that you yourself and others had brought up during some of the prior applications, some of the deficiencies in those prior applications. So with regard to the warranty, getting back to that, in the documentation, Mr. Kraus has explained in his report that that product has been used for 30 years in this industry to rehab buildings. He explained that. So we know that that product's been around for 30 years. Manufacturers just don't get to put out 50-year warranties and have them mean nothing. The transferability, personally as a lawyer, I thought it was important because it demonstrates that the product ensures the integrity of the building going forward, something that this commission really should be concerned about. A slate product, a natural stone, stone's not going to come with any warranty.
Well, we could talk to Gary about that. He's the expert.
You're an expert too.
It does come with a warranty
You're
from
an
the
expert.
contractor.
A contractor can provide you with a labor warranty, but they can't guarantee a stone's not going to crack. They can't guarantee, and if they put it in writing and they put it in the contract, they can guarantee you this: it's not going to be 50 years. It's not going to be 50 years.
Gary, do you want to speak to that?
And you can look at what's in the record on page. You were asking questions about where the pattern came from. Page 15 of our letter report. There's photographs of the existing roof, right? We, and the picture was up before, working with Mr. Brown and the manufacturers, came up with a custom blend of synthetic slate tiles to as closely match the colors exhibited on that roof as possible. And that's what you see in the back, right? And if you look at that roof, you asked all sorts of questions like, did you patch the roof? They haven't patched the slates, but what happens with slate over time? Here's the reality of slate. You lean a ladder against the edge of the roof, it's gonna potentially crack the slates on the edge of brittle. A man has to go up and repair slates 5, 6 courses up, he's gonna step on them, they can crack. So what happens is you can see on this roof, rather than be the random patchwork, which is historically significant, I think you know that, you have a roof that has groupings of different colored tiles. They age different over time. We didn't put them on, my ownership group didn't put them on, they're on the roof now. Our purpose, the integrity of the building, needs a roof, but the historical significance of the building, all the exterior elements, the Gothic architecture, all the cornices, the doorways, the entrances, and the roof are being visually preserved. The aesthetic that you referenced, the aesthetic for Mill Street, Mr. Kraus referenced that because that was the view that back in the historical period people saw of this building. It was from Mill Street. He's referencing under the standards the view that someone in 1930, 1935, or 1940. I know you're smirking, and maybe you don't agree.
Because unfortunately, you don't know the history of the site, and you're only referencing what Google Streets will tell you. The site was constructed by a philanthropist benefactor who created a rural park-like setting around the building for the community.
Okay.
It wasn't only viewed from the street.
It was a private property. I understand what you're sharing with us. If you are standing at the building, you have to look up 40 feet to see the roof. It's not a big, long, sloping roof like the Park Country Club. And I grew up around here. I'm sure, it sounds like you have too. If you go down into the orchard by the creek, you're down in a wetland that's 40 or 50 feet down a hill below this. Now you're looking up 80 feet to see the roof. All the views of the roof are at a distance. And I don't want to diminish and say we're hiding something. Absolutely not. My point is simply this. You look at that synthetic slate material, its purpose is to look like slate. Its purpose is to maintain the aesthetic characteristics of the building. Your factors under subsection C, 121.8, subsection C, compatibility considers the general design and character of the proposed alteration. General design and character, it looks just like slate. It looks just like slate. No one here.
You think these two look exactly the same?
Mr. Kraus gave a professional opinion about that, and that is what the Park Service has concluded. That's what the interior regulations say.
I'm
That
asking, do you think that looks exactly the same?
I think it looks exactly like from where I'm standing, 20 feet away, absolutely. And the profile matches the slate. The dimensions, the reveal matches the slate. Scale and visual compatibility. When I was showing you what was on the roof now, right? Historically, that looks like a slate roof. And I don't think anyone's going to disagree with me. That what we're proposing looks like a way better slate roof than the deteriorated one. That's under your code.
The brown pieces on there are patches. They're not even original.
From my understanding before, in one of our meetings on site, some of the slate has an iron content, other sections do not, and it's the oxidation over time that reveals that reddish brown color.
Absolutely.
It changes over time with the natural slate.
And that's because it's a natural material. If there's iron in it, it'll turn brown. If there's copper in it, it'll turn green. If it just stays gray, well, great, it stays gray. But under subpart 3 of the code, the texture, the synthetic mimics the texture of slate. It's the same texture. The color mimics slate. And we have a professional opinion that it looks like slate. Maybe up close you disagree, but if we ask everybody else, many people on other projects have said it looks like slate. It's a good replacement for slate. The visual compatibility for this project is what's paramount here. And I understand, Ms. Coppola, that you and maybe other members of the commission were frustrated with the applications last year, that there was some work done that you didn't think should have gone forward, that it didn't reflect the historic significance of the building that people on the commission and maybe other members of the community had. That stopped. We looked at the application, we listened to the commission's questions, the concerns, we came up with a product and a presentation that presents and ensures the aesthetic of a slate roof on this historic structure is carried forward. I wanted to mention one other thing. As you noted, there's a number of members of the community here, many of whom are residents at the facility. The owners would like to go forward with some other projects. This roof project, we would like to be able to move forward with and get it done in the next 6 months. One of the reasons for that is we wanted to resurface the parking lots. We can't resurface the parking lots if we're going to have heavy equipment and scaffolding working on the roof. There's other projects in mind for the building as well. This one, and getting it approved and then getting it under contract to be installed is of paramount importance to the building itself and the residents there, and to maintain the historic significance of the structure. We would gladly have Mr. Kraus answer any questions you have, and obviously you're more knowledgeable than I am when it comes to historic standards and structures and things like that. But I would urge the commission to consider granting our application as presented so that we can get this project moving for the benefit of the residents and the community as a whole.
Just one quick question. I'm new to the commission. I wasn't privy to the previous decisions, whether that's good or bad, it doesn't matter. But what I am curious in are these extra projects that you're mentioning, because I do have concerns about the long-term future of this building. What can you elaborate on some of these other projects or deferred maintenance in general, regardless of the roof, but other projects that you're thinking of or may have not been done at the expense of this roof?
I wouldn't say that there's things that haven't been, the roof has been prioritized. Excuse me, the roof has been prioritized. The areas around the building were going to be resurfaced, the parking lots and the entranceway. One of the problems that the roof has presented is there's a courtyard, and the slate is deteriorated to the point that pieces of stone and slate fall down. They've damaged some of the condensing units from time to time, but in general, the residents aren't able to walk in close proximity to the building until we get that material off and replaced with something. So there's a general safety concern. So one of the projects, once the roof is replaced, would be resurfacing the parking lots, and then also reopening the courtyard to accessible foot traffic for the residents.
So are you saying that the disrepair of the roof in some ways jeopardizes the health of other parts of that structure? For example, the facade or the brickwork or some of the other architectural elements?
I would defer to Mr. Kraus to give you his opinion on that. From my observations, because I have gone to this property recently, the answer from my observations is yes. There's slate material spread all around the foundation from time to time. They pick it up, but there's little pieces you can see where it fell. I don't know if in your experience.
I mean, anytime you have a bad roof, you have a problem building. So we have a roof that is at the end of its lifespan and needs to be replaced. If it's not replaced, you're going to have water infiltration that would go into the masonry building inside the building that's going to cause more problems. So yes.
Thank you.
So just a synopsis from me, thinking back to the submission from last year, a regurgitation of the same thing with albeit added examples of different projects that were successful using this material. To me, this boils down to one thing, that the owner has failed to demonstrate an economic feasibility issue. So you went out, you procured design services through Mr. Brown to do a slate in-kind replacement roof. You received bids to do that work. You presented them to us. You've shown the cost difference between the synthetic slate product and the actual slate product. And so, in looking at all the factors that we have to, I'll speak for myself, that I have to judge, the economic feasibility is not one that we judge. We judge the things that are submitted to us. So you've submitted a project that I actually wrote the motion on last year, and I think that it's, and I'll just restate, you've not demonstrated an economic feasibility issue to us, which is part of perhaps a hardship application. Without seeing that data, I can't move forward with allowing a substitute material, including what has shown in the National Interior Standards. Okay, you can reference item, I think, Bulletin 16. It all says to replace, and well, it all says to use as much historic material as possible, and if not, replace in kind. I'd also like to add that you keep calling it a rehabilitation. This is actually a replacement. We're not rehabilitating the existing roof. I think I could at least see that this existing roof is at the end of its useful life. I recognize that.
To answer your
Yep.
comment, the reason you hear the reference to rehabilitation is the town code at section 121-8, part B, references that your decision will be guided by the current edition of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings as general criteria. So the rehabilitation standard, as Mr. Kraus pointed out, is lesser than restoration. That was what he was explaining. So the reason
it's
that
not
we
a
use,
restoration,
the
that's right.
reason we use the term rehabilitation is because it comes out of the town code and the standards that we're referring to. With regard to economic feasibility, the National Park Service guidelines and the standards otherwise do allow you to give consideration to the fact that the use of the slate material is more cost effective. It's expensive, don't get me wrong. It's way more expensive than an asphalt shingle roof. We're making a significant investment to maintain the historic character of the building. But the hardship application, those standards have nothing to do with what you're asking here. We're asking you to do here today. The standards that are in front of you under the town code and the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation consider the scale and visual compatibility of what we're proposing, and in particular, they deal with whether or not, excuse me, it's under subpart B, lowercase 1. It says that the historic features will be altered as little as possible. None of the stone facades changing, none of the Gothic peaks are changing. The roof will look the same from the street. The material will be styled in the same dimensions as natural slate, look like natural slate, but just be a modern synthetic slate look-alike.
So let's go back to that. And then I have one follow-up question as well. So the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation's treatment of materials. Let's go through that because that is what the basis for our denial was last time. The first step is to repair the material. Okay, we've done that. Everyone seems to agree that the material has reached its lifespan. Number 2, to replace in kind. You want us to skip to replacement with another completely different material. And we can call it synthetic slate. It has nothing to do with slate. It has no characteristics of slate. It is not porous, or it is not a natural material. The coloration is not the same. The texture is not the same. All of the reasons that we listed in our first and second denial. I think I wrote the first one, you wrote the second one. So you want us to skip over, without having economics come into the picture, you want us to deny our code that says we need to follow the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and move from step 1 to step 3, skipping step 2, which is to replace in kind.
We're proposing step 3, which is to replace with a look-alike
Correct,
that has no detrimental aesthetic impact on the building.
according to you. I feel differently.
According to our expert.
And I am also an expert. So I appreciate his expertise, but I am also an expert in 3 categories, not just 1. So my expert opinion is there's a gigantic visual difference, and I don't know if I just have better eyesight. I wear contacts and glasses, so I doubt it, but visually I can see a difference. And I told Mr. Brown that I have gone to some of the other sites where he has worked with clients to install it was municipal buildings in Orchard Park, and I took photos, I shared that with the commission, and I thought it was a huge visual difference. And that was a very small 1-story building, right? I think it was 1.5 story, 1-story building that was very gray. It didn't have the differentiation of the different weathered colors and the rich colors that are seen here in the example, and the minerals coming through over time. So I disagree. I mean, Mr. Krass's group has worked on the East Castle Place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Did you guys suggest to them that they replace their historic slate roof with EchoStar? Or they worked on the 3-story stone house in Little Compton, Rhode Island. Did you suggest they took their roof and replaced it with EchoStar? We feel the same about this building as those buildings that you worked on getting historic tax credits. Which leads me to my next question. We've asked this before. Will this building be receiving or applying for historic tax credits for the rehabilitation work going on here? Rehabilitation work.
There's nothing available that we're applying for. We're not applying, we don't have an application in the works for anything like that right now.
Mr. Kraus works on this every day in his job. He submits nominations. He works on historic tax credits. He is an expert right here for Mr. Granville to listen to. We would like the applicant to apply for historic tax credits to make up that delta between the lowest bidder, which may not have been fully responsible because it was so far off from the other synthetic slate replacement contractors' bids, to natural slate. It was a very small delta when you looked at the mean bid for synthetic slate. The lowest bid maybe was thinking some change orders here and there will make up the difference of why they bid so low. But the natural slate bid, a lot of them came in the very same range. You know, how can we make up that difference? We are trying to help the applicant. So we have a historic tax credit expert right here in our midst, and we were told, nope, this project just can't go for historic tax credits. So maybe we could get educated tonight on
How much,
historic tax credits.
how much would a credit be? I mean, we're talking $1.4 million. Is that all going to come right back to the owner?
Well, in New York State, which I know a lot of your work is not in New York State, but you do have some experience,
think
it's 20 and 30.
I think you're getting a little off the topic, though, because the topic is that we have applied for a certificate of appropriateness. The information that you're referencing from prior applications and your familiarity with the fact that natural slate does cost more, you think it has certain characteristics as a natural product that you find desirable. We've presented our claim under the code with the support of an expert and his opinion regarding this particular site, and that under the code and under the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, we meet the standards. That's why we brought all this information in for you to look at. That's why we presented it. It doesn't have a detrimental impact on the structure. You're complaining about the material.
I'm complaining about the material. I wouldn't put it that way. I am a professional, after all.
How can these national landmarks in other areas of the country, in numerous areas cited by Mr. Kraus, get the approval to go to this synthetic slate? And yeah, maybe it's a misnomer in that, but products need names, and that's what it's meant to simulate. But they all can make that substitution, and here we are in Amherst insisting on an absolute 100% replacement with slate. What gives us the ground to be so adamant in that regard? That's a question for the commission here.
Our statute does, and I'm going to read this statement again for you. In the interpretation, number 32, the resulting determination based on the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation are not necessarily applicable beyond the unique facts and circumstances of each particular case. They had 3 different case studies in this ITS, and number 3 is a 7 to 8 story building, and the slate roof was basically on the peaks of the towers. So unless we were to do a case study ourselves to compare each building with the circumstance that we have here, then what he mentioned was what the narrative that was crafted to tell us EchoStar is fine.
I'll base a lot of my opinion here today is in circumstances seen on my last 3 years here on the commission, and we've looked at other certificate of appropriateness. We ran a group out of here. They wanted to use plastic frame windows to replace wood frame windows, and the job got nixed, so the windows remain wood, and they have to live with that.
They've actually said that they're thrilled with their wood windows that have been rehabilitated, and it saved them a ton of money. So they've actually stated that.
And I can also reiterate, I've dealt with some individuals, and I can tell you their concern with remaining appropriate prevents them from doing maintenance work on their house. So I think we need to look at ourselves as to how flexible we are in not being absolute on every little thing. And a lot of what we're talking about right now are absolute comparisons. And how can you say, well, that doesn't match in my opinion. Well, you're never going to get a match for everyone's opinion. So I just think our opposition is out of place. We've been in this place for a year and a half probably. I think it came up in the winter a year and a half back, but I cannot see how we have to be so adamant in insisting on slate, and that's all I can say. Thanks.
Ms. Culpa, you had asked a question about tax credits, so I'll let Mr. Kraus answer that for you.
Sure.
Sure. So just to clarify on the historic tax credits, so if this project was to be submitted for historic tax credits, the review takes into account everything on the building, not just the roof. And everything would need to meet the standards. This is the first step. So if ownership wanted to change flooring out, if they wanted to change HVAC, if they want to do any of those things, that would impact what they could do. That's likely to increase the cost of maintenance and changing anything on the interior of the building, which is not your purview. By imposing that, you're in fact forcing them to meet standards on the interior that they're not required to meet in front of this body. Additionally, once the project is completed, there's a 5-year recapture period. They could lose their historic tax credits if something happens to an ownership entity, if there's an accounting error, anything like that, that's putting more risk on them. Beyond that, the historic tax credits require that you spend beyond the adjusted basis. Now, I am not an accountant, and so I will not speak to the specific accounting side of this. But if the project doesn't spend more than the adjusted basis of the project, which is basically the value of the building minus the land, you cannot use the tax credits. And I, again, can't speak to that, but if the roof is 1.4 million, do we know what the building is worth?
Just got an assessment, so what is it? 800,000? Well, the ownership should know. It should be fresh on their minds.
And beyond that, you have to be able to actually use the historic tax credit. You have to have an entity that can use it. Typically, projects are bringing investors into a project, and for, frankly, a project that's 1.4 million, no investors are going to invest in that.
But you could sell the tax credit.
Well, you can't sell the tax credit. You have to have an investor brought in through a master lease or a partnership.
If I may, a big picture question. I think we would all agree in an ideal world, if all else being equal, you would use the original materials. So because I'm new.
Well, let's let them answer that.
Well, I'm going to ask. So I'm just curious, what is the compelling interest in not using the original?
So I can't
Like,
speak.
why are we considering an alternative?
Sure, I can't speak to that. All I can speak to is the reason I'm here is our knowledge of working with the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and the numerous projects that we have seen approved at all different levels utilizing this product. And the National Park Service doesn't look at hardship either. They look at whether it meets the standards or not, and they determine that it meets the standards. That's the end of the question.
Well, then we can ask someone else, the ownership. Jeff's question about what is your compelling reason not to use the original material?
Sure. The original material is not as durable. It's more costly. It requires regular maintenance. It deteriorates on an annual basis. You have discoloration issues that arise, as shown on the photo up on the screen. It is a material that, in certain respects, is not used anymore because there are better materials now. And that is what the synthetic slate material is. It's a better material. It's more impervious to the weather, and it's got a 50-year warranty, and you're not going to have the types of periodic, episodic repairs of individual slate pieces that would be necessary. I don't think that it comes up under the town code directly, but you know, a natural slate roof costs more to install, it's harder to source, and it's more costly to maintain on an annual basis. It just is. So those are some of the owner's considerations. Those, by the way, are not reasons under the town code for why our application should be granted. The aesthetics and the appearance are paramount. And the product we proposed retains those, actually enhances what's there now. It enhances what's been there for 20 years.
All right, so on the durability is really what I'm getting at. Mrs. Culpa, because I'm not an expert, would you, in your opinion, would you say that this is a less or more durable? Would this synthetic material contribute to long-term sustainability of this building or less so?
It's not as environmental, it is not as durable, it does not have the longevity. I'm concerned, I don't know what the weight rating is as far as when, you know, 250-pound maintenance worker goes up and steps on it, if it will crack. I don't know enough about it as far as being, you know, up on the roof repairing it. But I do know the benefits of slate as an environmentally low-impact product, as far as being 100% waterproof and weatherproof, if it is maintained. This product, it's at its lifespan, which was installed in 26. Yep. So it's been up there almost 100 years. This product, this synthetic slate, will not last 100 years. It will chalk, it will deteriorate, it will lose its integrity. You know, maybe it'll last 50 years. We'll see. We've got another 20 on it to see what happens in the future with a correct install. But I think we skipped over, you said not really relevant, but you were going to give your information, so I'm going to give mine. We did talk about warranty a lot. And the warranty on the natural slate does come from the contractor. It's not a typical one-year New York State contractor's warranty. The warranties that were given by Mr. Brown far outweighed the EchoStar product. We know that the...
More than 50 years?
Pardon?
You're saying that they were more than 50 years?
Yes.
The warranty?
Yes. So we did our homework and we did evaluations. And that's why we're saying the natural slate product will...
Term-by-term warranty matching the EchoStar warranty. I don't believe...
Yes, we went through both of the warranties by the manufacturers that submitted per the specs that were bid on by the, I believe, 8 to 10? I mean, Gary did a wonderful job, the amount of contractors he got to bid on this project.
Just to kind of refocus something, the application that we have here is for the synthetic slate. A 50-year warranty is longer than the warranty on your roof. It's longer than the warranty on this building. It's longer than most roofing warranties out there. It is a commercially sound warranty. It's a legally binding warranty. And 50 years, I don't think anyone is going to disagree, is a long time. The owner has demonstrated that they're responsible for maintaining the building. It's been there for 20 years. The residents are happy. They'd like a new roof. Aesthetically, under the code standards, that we'd ask that the commission vote tonight to approve our application to install the synthetic slate material.
I have a question for perhaps Gary on that. We throw around 50-year warranty. Sorry, you're right behind Mr. Lyons. And that often pertains to residential, and as soon as you look in the little fine print, if it's commercial or multi-unit residential, the terms change. Do you know the more specifics?
I know that terms won't change because this is mostly the other part.
Sorry, Mr. Brown, could you just come up to the mic end just to make sure it's on the record?
Do you know where I'm coming from?
Yes, yeah, no, this isn't, this would be the same either residential or commercial. The other thing, I believe that most roofers cannot get more than a 2-year warranty, no matter what it is, because of their insurance
Their liability.
They will not allow them to go any further than that. I was just, as we sat here, I was just looking at the Vermont slate, and they really didn't discuss warranties at all. They discussed
But your bid did, your specs did.
I'm sure I mentioned a 50-year warranty, but it's a material warranty. It's the same with the EcoStar. I think the warranties are probably very, very similar. It's a 50-year warranty.
Yeah, they're always material only.
Correct. And
Right, but they were both very long periods of time in
Yes.
both materials for the warranty.
yeah, as I recall, yes.
Yes, and we expect Slate as professionals to far outlast EchoStar because it is a proven material and we do know how long it lasts. I mean, we've talked about this before, 70 years at a bare minimum. And we have been concerned about the courtyard as well. And I think we've even suggested maybe we could think of an alternative material for that courtyard because it is not visible from the exterior of the building. We've talked about that, but the ownership doesn't seem to want to pursue that.
If you recall, our issue was tying it in. We talked about this, and you were like, well, what are you going to do at the top? I mean, how are you going to tie this in? And that was our major drawback.
It is true, and scaffolding is a concern for us in the future as well, right? Every time you have to replace the roof, it's an expensive scaffolding situation, and, you know, we know that asphalt and synthetic slate do not last as long as natural slate.
One of the advantages of the EcoStar product is it will be easier to repair. It's lighter. You can cut it with a circular saw. You can put it on with a nail gun. Where with slate, it's a real art of shaving slate to the right sizes and not over nailing them and all those sorts of things. My fear, and I expressed this earlier, was in 50 years, I don't think anybody's going to be doing slate. It's such an art, and there's so few contractors now that still do it. I was talking to one contractor, and he's like, our slate crew's done for the year. I mean, in March, they're already filled up, and that because they only have a few guys that can do it.
Gary, are you aware of any maintenance that's required on the EcoStar as time progresses? 10, 20 years, you have to go up, wash it, get algae off if there's anything like that. Is there any routine maintenance as part of that 50-year life?
Nothing that I know of, but any shingle, slate, whatever. If it's under trees and it's wet a lot, you're going to get some moss on it. I mean, that's just life.
If I may, members of the commission, I just want to mention something very quickly, something Mr. Hershey just mentioned. The 50-year warranty doesn't mean simply that the product life is only 50 years. To be clear, the warranty itself is 50 years. The life of the product could be significantly longer. And again, to Mr. Hershey's point earlier, I would emphasize that that is one of the chief factors why multiple federal and state agencies have approved this on the use of very significant historical structures.
Thank you.
Go
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to add, I mean, really what it's coming down to for me is I'm just looking for a compelling interest or reason why I should use an alternative material. That's all I mean, if this petitioner could tell me, okay, we're doing this for anything other than just because it looks the same, I could be convinced. But just using an alternative material just because it looks the same is just not moving the needle for me. I mean, if it's a financial reason, that's a separate conversation that I'm trying to dig at.
Agreed. That's a separate submission.
Can I just opine for 1 second on that topic? Obviously, the cost, money always talks, right? No matter what. Money is always the number one factor. But the new synthetic slate will mimic the look and color of the existing slate, especially with copper flashings, which we plan on using. It is easier to install. It is safer to install, easier to repair, and it'll be faster. It'll be a much quicker process than using real slate.
There's your other reasons.
To the member's point on that, it is not simply that it's the aesthetic that is the reason why we're proposing to use this. As Mr. Brown just mentioned, it is the culmination of multiple factors, the durability, the repairability, the lifespan, and everything.
Your partner just said, if you'll let me interject, because he just said the only basis for this certificate of appropriateness is per the code, and that's aesthetic and appearance. So you're contradicting one another.
No, ma'am, I apologize. I'm not contradicting him. What I'm pointing out and what my partner pointed out is that the code considers only the aesthetics. What we are proposing to use this synthetic product for is for a multitude of reasons that Mr. Brown just succinctly summarized for us. It's repairability, it's life and longevity, and cost and installation ability. The code focuses on the aesthetic only. That is what the 8 enumerated factors in the town code focus exclusively on, is the visual aesthetic values of this product. That is why we provided you the material examples here. It's why we provided all the photos that we could to demonstrate, and why Mr. Kraus has opined with the support of the materials from the NPS, that the aesthetic, which is what the code focuses exclusively on, matches.
Right, and the NPS guidelines, stage 1, repair. Stage 2, replace in kind. 3, we'll start thinking about alternative materials. Can we go through the reasons for substitute materials that were given to us, anybody who watched the webinar or participated in the webinar on the update for Preservation Brief 16 substitute materials? They had 8 points. Number 1, unavailability of materials.
Kate, I asked a question during that webinar, and the primary point made, considering if you bring cost into the equation, the one word used was, is the character, quote unquote, character of the building maintained? That was their guiding statement in that regard to cost. That's all I can add.
And I'll say once again, the cost is not something that we, at this level, with this application, is something we consider. In another application, it sounds like cost is definitely a factor. In a separate application where you can demonstrate an economic hardship, we would certainly listen to that.
Again, I think the evidence presented by Mr. Kraus and others tonight have focused on the building maintaining its character with the use of synthetic slate. So can we go on from there and give them a yes or no?
Well, it's based on a substitute material, so I would like to go through these 8 points. So reasons for substitute materials. The unavailability of material. No, we know that's not true because there are bids that prove otherwise. Number 2, unavailability of skilled labor. No, we know that the bids prove otherwise. Number 3, inadequately durable. No, this is a superior durability product. If anybody has anything else to say about that on the commission, feel free to interject. Number 4, secondary feature. No, the National Register nomination lists the slate roof as a notable feature of the building. It is not secondary. Number 5, a new addition. Nope, this material is being proposed for the historic building. Number 6, is it a missing feature that needs to be replaced? No, the slate is in place or was in place prior to the owner demoing it without approval. Number 7, code required performance. I can only think of 2 code instances in this instance, fire efficiency and energy efficiency. Slate has an IBC Class A fire resistance rating and is an energy efficient roofing material because of its dense nature that can keep out cold and keep in heat or vice versa. Number 8, resilience and sustainability. Slate is impervious to water, can withstand hail, winter weather, and the longevity of the product reduces landfill waste and therefore has a lower environmental impact. So can this EcoStar product be do we need to entertain the EcoStar product as a substitute material for slate according to the 8 criteria that were given to us based on the updated Preservation Brief 16 for substitute materials?
But my question again, how can all these other places throughout the country make the same exact substitution? The Department of Interior standards, that's a federal law, and how are they operating differently than what we're trying to operate
They
under
don't
here.
all do that. There are successful stories of direct slate replacement locally in local projects. It's not every project. It's a few selected projects for this purpose.
Well,
But
let's
there are
make this-
definitely,
Make this one of those few selected projects.
Mr. Crow,
Position to a project that's viable, the roof continues to leak, and here we are asking questions on the suitability, the appearance, the opinions come into exact matching, and we'll be here a year and a half from now, doing the same thing.
We're not entertaining questions from or comments.
The-
And I'm sure you know that because I'm sure you walked through the building.
The entire purpose for the synthetic slate product is to replace natural slate because of its aesthetic appearance. That's the reason why these products exist. That's why Mr. Kraus was able to testify about multiple products that have been approved both at the state and federal level using synthetic slate. That's the purpose of this building is the shining star example of when you use synthetic slate. It's like the examples he cited, and Ms. Culpa, you're correct. No two buildings are going to be exactly the same, but this is 4.5 to 5 stories up. There's not a residential neighborhood around it. As a matter of fact, this town approved a commercial building a couple hundred feet away that's just vinyl siding and shingles. The building
This is
itself.
not a historic district, therefore we don't have purview over buildings 100 feet
I
away.
didn't say that you
I
did.
just
I'm
wanted to clarify from your statement. You just said that this town approved. We had nothing to do with that
And that's
approval.
why I said the town.
Okay.
Fair? My point is that the aesthetics of this building will not only be retained, they'll be enhanced. The integrity of the roof system and the structure as a whole will be enhanced. Frankly, we can't argue with your opinions that you think slate is better. You've offered no empirical evidence to demonstrate that. The product we have, the lifespan of buildings for project approval is typically 30, not 50 years. This product will last longer than that, and it will ensure the integrity of the building. You heard that it's safer to install, it's safer once installed, it's easier to repair, and from a distance, it looks identical to slate. That's our expert's opinion, and we want the commission to please approve this. We're making a substantial investment here to ensure the integrity of the property, the aesthetics of the property, the historic significance of the property. And we didn't come in, and we tried to cure some problems before when they were using alternative materials that didn't mimic the slate that's on the roof. Our application addresses that. And the 8 factors you cited, if you consider those factors, I would tell you, if you viewed every one of those as controlling, you'd never be able to approve a synthetic slate roof on any historic structure in the country.
which is why we have in our statute the ability to apply for economic hardship in this case. It keeps coming back to the same issue. That's an economic hardship.
You're punishing us for
I'm not punishing. I'm asking to demonstrate it is one.
We've been begging this owner to do something about this roof for over a year.
we're here tonight to do that.
And it's not.
You saw the estimates. You told me they're not before you right now. Maybe you have them. This is an expensive project. This is not a lowball. This is not a cheap shortcut. This is what they do on historic projects from Boston to Newark to Buffalo.
I think you
Mr.
had
Kraus
about
testified.
10 bids, and this was a low ball by far, and you're trying to use it as a comparison against Slate. This was the only contractor that gave you this low of a bid. All the other synthetic slate bids
I
were
don't have-
much higher,
Ms.
closer to
Culpa,
real
Ms.
slates.
Ms. Culpa?
We do know the bids.
Whatever you may be referring to, we're not here with a bid in hand. We picked a product that our consultant has had approved on many other buildings, and he gave you
Give a
examples.
justification that we are going to give a response as to how we are interpreting that response because of the year-long process that we've had with this application already. So we have seen the bids, we've seen the bids in detail. We know the discrepancy for the low bid of synthetic slate versus the lowest bid of slate. And we know the discrepancy of the lowest bid of synthetic slate versus all of the other synthetic slate bids. So if you take the mean of all of those, it's very comparable to slate.
Kate,
That's why
Kate,
we're having an issue.
excuse me, on this.
Historic or economic hardship.
On economic hardship, I asked the question earlier, is it going to cover $1.4 million? I didn't get an answer. Now, if somebody told me it would cover $1.4 million or even 2/3 of the cost of the project, then I would say, let's go ask the owner to request economic hardship. But I didn't get an answer to that 1.4 million. And from the numbers I've seen, I've never seen anything close to that's going to be 40, 50% of the project cost. I don't think there's anything like that with any of these grants that put out on historic buildings.
So, is there a new bid? Like, can the owner proceed with the
I'd like to hear the answer stated to my question. We're holding it up on economic hardship application.
We're not, and that's not what we've
What,
denied it
what,
based on in the
what,
past.
what percent is given on economic hardship projects?
We don't have an economic hardship application in front of us.
We have no idea at prior business with the corporate grants these hardship.
We do, and we've never gone through one before as a group. And
idea, not 10, 20, 30, 40%?
we actually thought that's what we were going to see this month was an economic hardship application. Because that's
Excuse
what
me,
we were told by Mr. Brown.
I think you know the answer to my question. It's not going to come close to 1.4 million.
May I seek a point of clarification from Mr. Brown? I'm sorry, I'm a liaison, I'm not commissioner. I am also married to a man who owns a roofing company. The bids are from 2022. At that point, or 23, when they were bidding, they would have expected to start at the start of this season. You mentioned in passing here, but just so that I may understand, are you saying it is likely now that this summer season of roofing for an actual slate contractor may already be filled up? And so then we're looking potentially at a 2025 bid or somebody who could do it, which may lead to, and I'm not saying it does or does not, I'm not a voting member of this commission, but there was, one of the things was inavailability of labor, correct? So we're looking at potentially, and I don't know if you can maybe speak a little bit more here, a year before a slate contractor could, there are very few roofers, I think that's fair to say, everybody knows, who still put on slate roofs.
And part of what's in our statute is to have,
He's nodding his head, but
Yeah.
for the record, I believe he's saying, yes, that's correct.
is
that
is
right,
to
Mr.
have
Brown?
a public hearing
Yes.
on hardship. So that's part of the thing. We can't just
But I
usurp
think
that
before
process.
We're going to the hardship, the 8 characteristics that you just read, that wasn't for hardship, that was to go from step 2 to step 3, or am I? Yes, and one of step 2's was inavailability of labor, right? So that would allow us to go to number 3, not us, excuse me, I apologize, but it would allow the commission to go from step 2 to step 3 for replacement with a similar material. And you're saying potentially, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you did mention in passing something about March being filled up, that there is a potential inavailability of labor for the project. So there may be a qualification under the standards, if you could read it again, because now I may have misread it, but
Right.
that's where I'm saying.
For the record, Mr. Brown said yes.
Yes, but
Yeah,
for
please.
council member
Yes.
Marinucci's benefit.
Thank you.
This project was bid, and then it came before this board for the same material. It was denied. The bids were presented to us at that time, and there wasn't a shortage of skilled labor at that time, and we were given by several contractors a schedule that they could meet to install the products, both synthetic slate and slate. So this project could have been on the schedule, I don't know, maybe a whole year ago, because they did hire Mr. Brown to complete kind of like a condition survey of the roof in and they did actually bid this.
He just said the labor's not available now. The prior applications are not what we're here on. We're on the current application.
Potentially, right. We don't know for sure because, no one has reached out to these contractors, but if we keep delaying a project and keep coming for the same thing over and over again for the same project, not only is it kind of double jeopardy, or maybe there's a different path you're trying to pursue, But yes, maybe the contractors will be like, they're not serious because they've waited so long to sign a contract with a contractor for the work that they bid. Those bids, I believe, are invalidated now because the time frame has gone well beyond that. So instead of people kind of pointing blame at this commission for inaction, I find objection to that because
I didn't do that. My client didn't do that. We just simply asked if we could get a ruling tonight approving this so we could go forward, because it's important.
it is important.
If I may, with respect to Ms. Culpa's comment there, just
It's Waterman Culpa, by the way, just so you know. Thank you.
with respect to Ms. Waterman Culpa's comment there about the prior applications versus this current application, I will point out two things in very stark worthiness here. First is this application is a new application, albeit proposing a material that you may have previously considered, but it wasn't considered under the current standards that were amended as of December 18th of 2023 and put into effect under this now current application. So there is a different application standard that is now applicable. That is why we are applying under this standard. The town substantially amended 121 in general to very clearly and very explicitly focus its attention when reviewing these types of applications, which by title are a certificate of appropriateness, for aesthetic value, right? That is why this application focuses on those new standards under that newly implemented code.
Do you have something to add?
Well, two thoughts I had, they're kind of sequential. So I guess they're towards Gary and Nick, for your professional opinion. It seems that EcoStar has been the manufacturer product of Desire, right? I know there's Bravia, I think you mentioned Da Vinci. Why EcoStar over any others that you would put your professional opinion, recommendation, name on a project of this caliber?
Sure, I can only answer the fact pattern in front of me, and it was looking at the EcoStar and being asked for an opinion on the standards related to synthetic slate and that specific product. I couldn't speak to if there are other ones that may be applicable, may not be. I wasn't asked to do that. So what's in my report is specific to past precedent, Park Service and other municipality and state reviews and approvals, and the specific product that was being proposed. So I wouldn't want to speak out of turn. Yes, I mean specifically the 257 Liberty project, the first comp that we had in here is EcoStar, and that was approved through the Park Service through the Historic Tax Credit Program. And again, that's on a one-story building with a sidewalk 10 feet away, so fully visible. So that's really kind of our guide as far as EcoStar. But the guidance does not call out products. You know, the National Park Service cannot favor products, but we can only comment on what I was looking at, which is the EcoStar and what we've seen used before.
And have they tracked them over the last 20, 30 years of how they are performing? Because they're not proven yet, right?
Sure, and I would, to speak to that, you know, alternative materials are approved by the National Park Service all the time. And again, the standards for rehabilitation are based on aesthetics. They're not tracking whether a material is a good material or bad material. If someone does a tax credit project and puts on a bad roof that meets the standards and then they have to redo it 2 years later on their own money, that's their problem. It's not the Park Service's problem. They only care about what it looks like.
And then I guess with that, my other thought was, because bids and other such things have been now way timed out, can the owner proceed with the current price for the installation of the product that we're anticipating?
I spoke with Brian at Bezroy Roofing, and he said they could do it. He said that EcoStar is in Holland, New York, 45 minutes away. They are excited to do this project. this would be a real showpiece for them. So yes, the price is still good, but not for much longer.
Clarify one other thing, Mr. Brown's still here. You asked about price and availability to do it. My understanding is that if we were able to get this approval this spring, that we would be able to have the roof on before the winter. Like, that would be the goal. It has to, they have to work with the manufacturer and the installer, but Mr. Brown has been talking to both about that.
Okay. Does any other commission members have anything else to ask? Any comments? You have anything to add?
No, I could pick apart almost everything in this document, but I'm done. I'm done. So I'm ready to make a motion.
Do you have anything to add, Jeff? No. I just want to reiterate once again that economics is not a consideration on our judgment of this application. I would say that the applicant has demonstrated other successful projects using this alternative material. However, for me, I would need to see some sort of economic hardship application in order to move forward with this alternative material. I don't know if there's anyone has anything to add to that.
I'll just add that I'm on the opinion that I agree. I think the material is visually very similar. I think that the sitting of the building impacts its visual, your appearance. And I also agree that there are other defining features to this building that define its character. But I'm not convinced that the synthetic material is better in any other way that would make it different than using the synthetic, other than cost, right? And because that's a separate process, all else being equal, I would prefer you would use the original material. And I think that's my opinion on it.
Norm here again. I would just add, I disagree with that. Economics is not a factor in any of these decisions this board makes. I think we got to be a little more open-minded on that particular factor without ignoring all the other requirements of building character. And regarding the economic hardship application, I think before we establish that as a defining decision maker, we need to know what percent the owner could possibly get before again, I brought that up earlier, but it's a moot point if they're going to get $140,000 out of $1.4 million. So that's my point.
Yeah, that it's a separate process. Economics is a separate process from this process that we've tried.
We need to know what those dollar amounts are for economic hardship.
Exactly, that's right.
But the only way to get to that point would be for the commission to deny the use of this product. I'm just for point of conversation, Norm.
Understanding that each application is its own unique circumstance, there still has to be guidelines within the state, local, federal, whoever, as to what percent is possibly given as a credit.
Do you think I could ask to go into executive session with legal counsel?
Guess that's a question for Nora.
Said I would like to ask to go into executive session to consult our legal counsel. I make a motion to do that.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just tell everyone to leave the room and stop recording.
Like to ask
I'd like to make a motion to return to session for a meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. The meeting commences. After discussion, we have a couple statements. First being that the owner currently has options open to them, including repairing the existing material. They do not need our approval to do so. A repair in kind can be done on your own accord. Did we have a second? Is there a second? Is that the only piece of
So
advice?
we entered back into.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So
So that was a statement.
that was
Yes,
the
that's
statement.
it.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess I'll make a motion for the certificate of appropriateness that was submitted on March 26, 2024, with the description of the scope of work as the existing roof system is failing and the roof is in desperate need of repair. We are proposing a full roof replacement. Existing slate would be replaced with synthetic slate. Then supplemental material was supplied on behalf of Duke Holtzman to include the exhibits 1 through 6, and then supplementary 1 and 2 from Nick Cross of Heritage Consulting Group. The motion is as follows. To deny the EchoStar synthetic slate material in substitution for the natural slate material. The owner has stated that the original slate roof is at the end of its life, and the commission has reviewed the material as per, the substitute material as per the town statute. The Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, as well as the National Park Service Technical Briefs, number 29 for slate roofs, 4 for roofing of historic buildings, and 16 for substitute materials. The EchoStar product dramatically changes the visual and aesthetic effects of the roof. The proposed replacement alters the shape and pattern of the roof, absorbs the light rather than reflecting it like natural slate, and is much darker and monochrome compared to the existing slate.
Is there more to add?
I'm just looking through my notes.
Thank you.
The proposed EchoStar synthetic slate is very distinguishably and visually different from the natural slate that exists on the building. And that's it.
Does anyone second? I will second the motion. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mancuso,
Abstain.
Amplement,
Is the motion to deny or deny?
Yes.
Deny.
Swartz,
Motion to deny.
Waterman Culpa,
Motion to deny.
Hershey,
Excuse me, I didn't hear the motion. The motion is to deny the use of the synthetic slate?
EchoStar
Yeah.
synthetic slate
Oh,
that was
This
proposed.
EchoStar synthetic slate product,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm in favor of using EchoStar.
Kenzie,
Vote to deny.
Okay, we have,
Gentlemen, could I get a clarification? The motion was to deny the use of the EchoStar, and I think I heard 4 people vote using the term deny. Does that mean you're denying the motion or approving the motion? We need to have a clear record on that, because the way that it was posed, you all just, I believe, approved the EchoStar. And I'm not trying to be snarky, I just want a clear record on who voted which way.
we're denying the certificate of appropriateness. Should we take a recall on the vote?
can you restate the motion?
The whole thing.
We'll restate the motion.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to deny the certificate of appropriateness dated 3/26/24 with the work scope as follows. The existing roof system is failing and the roof is in desperate need of repair. We are proposing a full roof replacement. Existing slate would be replaced with synthetic slate. The scope of work was defined as well by supplemental material from Duke Holtzman dated March 26, 24, items 1 through 6, and items 1 through 2 from Heritage Consulting Group. The owner has stated that the original slate roof is at its end of its life, and the commission reviewed the material as per the town statute, the Secretary for Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, as well as the National Park Service Technical Preservation Briefs 29, slate roofs, 4, roofing of historic buildings, and 16, updated technical brief for substitute materials. The EchoStar synthetic slate material dramatically changes the visual and aesthetic effects of the roof. The proposed replacement material alters the shape, size, and pattern of the roof. It absorbs the light rather than reflecting it as natural slate would, and is much darker and monochromed compared to the existing slate. Therefore, again, I make a motion to deny the certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of the existing original slate roof with the EchoStar synthetic slate material.
And I will second that motion. Can I have a roll call either in approval, or I should say denial of the certificate of appropriateness, or approval of the certificate of appropriateness? No.
You want a motion to approve the
Sorry.
denial.
We want
So
a motion
if-
to approve the denial. Thank
Or
you.
deny the denial.
Thank you, yes.
So yes vote is yes to the motion, which denies the certificate.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mancuso,
Abstain.
Amplement,
Approve the motion?
Swartz,
Approve the motion.
Waterman Kalpa,
Approve the motion.
Hershey,
Oppose the motion. Oppose.
Kenzie,
Approved.
So we have a vote of 5 approvals of the motion and 1 abstention from the motion.
No, 4.
no. 4, 1 no, 1 abstain.
Thank you. The motion carries 4 to 1 and 1 abstention. As a reminder, the owner, there's a clock that starts a 30-day window to appeal any decision to the town board
Via the town clerk.
via the town clerk. Thank you.
And there are also options for economic hardship applications listed in our statute.
Okay, next item of new business, local landmark plaques. You'll see at the back, the last page of our plaque, or our packet, item 3A, is the print, the proposed plaque. We've amended to include 2 plaques, 2 for street furniture and 1 for 38 Richfield. So I wanted everyone to take a look at the print, make any commentary before we give the approval to the vendor to move forward.
So Brian, you came up with these, or where did these come from?
So this is
Sorry.
this is the standard, what the former chair had approved on the previous plaques. So for instance, this matches the one that will be installed at the Harlem Road Community Center.
I see, okay, so these go in.
Yep. And those are the inserts that are affixed to the front of the plaque.
Okay.
So
And,
it's consistent with the other ones.
Exactly. Yep.
okay, and this is just the second Main Street furniture one to bookend.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, so you're looking at 2, they're going to produce 2 plaques, 1 for 38 Richfield and 1 for the street furniture on Main Street. And I believe I sent the letter to the owner of 38 Richfield, Nora. Yep. I signed and sent the letter. So we're all set as far as
They're happy
legal
homeowners.
standing. Yeah. Yep. That's good. So if no one has any objections, I'll tell the vendor to move forward and produce these.
Do we usually say built instead of circa?
We can have them amend it.
What is, I guess when I don't think I've ever seen it say built when I've been in Charleston
we could
or
say-
anywhere else.
Circa, just a C, just
The CA.
period or C?
Is it CA?
Depends.
Or C.
Some people do C, some people do CA, some people just spell out circa.
That's true. I guess I think circa seems better than built,
Okay.
but however circa goes down, I guess whatever works.
Easy enough. I will notify the vendor, have them make that change. As long as you're okay with that change, I'll have them move forward and produce them.
Whoever wants to.
Yeah, we have a volunteer. Sounds good. All right. All right, Mary Lou. When we receive the items, I'll coordinate with you and hand it over for installation. We still have internal work to do on the Main Street corridor furniture. We haven't landed on an installation method yet.
I would probably do circa spelled out.
Okay.
That wouldn't be confusing.
Right, just do it,
A
yeah.
lot of these examples do that.
Do
Thank
the
you.
se- That's what
I mean, there is one there that's not, but
I think it's circa, yeah. Okay.
does anybody else want to see just some
Thanks, guys.
examples of maybe writing out circa on the thing instead of abbreviating it with a C or CA? I'm not sure everyone knows what C or CA means.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. I don't think we need to make any motions. It's just discussion. So can I move on to item number 4, Sony 24 CLG grant submission?
Do you need a motion to submit the purchase?
They already have the purchase order, yeah. This is just a
Proof.
mock-up.
Proof,
Yep.
yeah, there you go, proof.
Yep. All right, and item number 4, 2024 CLG grant submission. Myself, Ms. Waterman Culpa, Mr. Appleman met on March 28th to discuss tasks in order to move forward. We have another meeting at the end of this month, I believe. Yep, as our working group. I still need to come up with a scope. I will do that this week and send it along for approval, and then utilize the town procurement guidelines.
Well, so Councilmember Marinucci was in that meeting as well.
Yep.
And so I think the process is going to be that we're going to come up with a draft submission, and then we're going to have a talk with a pre-submission conference with SHPO's CLG coordinator.
That's going to take place next week, possibly?
We're going to set up the meeting, I think, next week.
Understood.
So, and then if they approve us moving forward with our ballpark estimate, which hopefully you're working on that, then we'll present our scope of services as our scope of work along with the expected price tag, and then get their approval, and then we can finish up the grant before it's due in May.
Okay.
So you
And that would be for us, actually, so we would recommend then to the town board, and they would actually be the ones that would submit the grant request.
Okay.
Setting up the meeting with SHPO is you, me?
We can handle it.
We meet with them next week.
She was thinking that's you, and I was like,
Yeah, no.
We can handle it.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Any other business on the CLG grant submission?
Nope.
Okay. I'll move on to item 5, 2024 Preservation Day planning. We had another meeting with Carrie Stiver. She's developing a set of presentations and a agenda. What do you call it?
Like a lecture section?
Itinerary,
Yeah.
sort of. So we all have certain tasks to do with that. Mary Lou, myself, Ms. Mary Lou Mancuso, myself, Ms. Waterman Culpa all met, along with Carrie Stiver and Ms. Marinucci. Were you? No, you were not at that meeting. That's right. A couple weeks ago. So we all have tasks. We're going to reconvene on
Next Friday.
next Friday.
But everyone has an email update for the speakers they've secured on this Friday.
Next meeting is next Friday.
Next Friday. On the 12th, the working group asked for an email update on secured speakers.
Yep. Yep, that's right.
At 1 o'clock on the 19th.
I believe that's right.
Yeah, is that right?
No, the 26th. The 26th at 1 o'clock.
Oh, that's your next meeting?
Next subcommittee meeting for the Preservation Day. Oh,
That's right. We're going to do CLG grant submission and preservation planning on the same day. That's right.
oh, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on Preservation Day planning? Okay. I'd like to make a motion to add an item to under new business.
All second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We would like to recommend advancing Haley Wright onto the open position of this board. We conducted an interview and had supplemental questions back and forth. We feel she's a qualified candidate, and we'd like to recommend her to the town board for
Fill
approval,
the vacant seat on the HPC.
to fill the vacant seat on the HPC.
I'd like to just give a minor clarification. I did speak with the town attorney. you do have an open historian position, but it is not required to be filled as a historian. It says, Nora, you might remember exactly, I could pull the, yeah, it said that you could use it, or it's not required to be a historian if you didn't want to appoint her to that specific position, although it does recommend that you would have that. I have the exact language, hold on.
I think we would, though.
She
That's
does.
her-
Yeah,
the
she does meet the
qualifications.
qualifications
Yeah.
based on what we had looked at, so I didn't know if you wanted to use it specifically from there.
Do the two positions come with different terms? Because one should have started, I believe, in January. And then, was there another one that hasn't been filled from, that was a holdover?
So what Marty sent me is from the town code, says should consist, but doesn't have to. So we,
I would,
No,
oh, I would,
I don't believe so. So what I believe is Miss Palmer carried the historian designation under her membership.
and the town code says, 121-5D, says, to the extent available in the town of Amherst, the commission should consist of the following, one of which should be a historian, which would be the open position, and we had some discussion over whether it was required. While she will have her master's in May, we looked at the BLS definition for historian, and we do believe that she would meet that. I just wanted to clarify from the town attorney, and Nora, I think he did speak with you as well, so I don't want to say that it was separate from you, but that you're not required to put her into that, or to recommend her for that position unless you'd like to, just so that we had it all out.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what ended, right?
Yep.
This-
No,
this
her
is
term
only
concluded.
a 7-member board, though, so we're only missing one person. So why are there multiple categories we can put someone into? I'm confused by that.
Yeah, so there, it says, at least one shall be an architect, so it, basically, we could say that, or you, not we, that you couldn't find, it to the extent available in the town of Amherst, a historian, and therefore you appointed another at-large one. So like, there are, it's all, like, it should consist of those, you're not required to consist of those members with those titles. But, because she meets the qualifications, again, it's up to you guys.
I think I would be comfortable advancing her, that application in that manner. What process is involved with doing that?
So I would then prepare a resolution for submission to the town board to vote on her into the position of a historian on the HPC, and pending the vote of the full town board, she would then be appointed from there.
And so the term will need to be looked at because right now, one expires this year,
Well, it should be
two
Sue's.
expire next year, and then
I think mine expires at the
one
end of this year.
expires in 26 and one in 27. So you have to look at the statute to see when that term actually does expire. You have to look back at the past members and see
the start of the
where they were in the cycle and then fill her in.
Right, we want to maintain a
The same-
cycle so we have members either coming off,
Understood.
being re-upped, but so that there's a consistent, at least, I think, there has to be at least 4. We don't want vacancies.
Got it.
Okay. Okay. Do you need anything else, any other information from us? in order to
No,
prepare that
I
recommendation?
think that should be sufficient for now. I believe I have her resume in my email. That's the only thing that we do like to circulate for review, so.
If you don't, I do have it.
Yeah, I think you may have sent it to me as well.
Do we need to take a vote?
Last time we did make a motion
Yeah.
for Jeff, so did you make the motion and I'll second it to recommend?
I just made a motion to
Haley?
add an item. I didn't make a motion. I said I would like to add, it's just discussion about adding her. I have not made a motion.
Okay, so I'll make. Yep, so I'll make a motion to recommend to the town board that Haley Wright fill the position of historian, the vacant seat of historian on the Historic Preservation Commission.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I did call her when I had time, and we spoke at length. So I didn't want you to think that because I missed the interview, I didn't speak to her and get a sense
Motion.
how she would perform as an HPC member. I was very impressed.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-0.
Do you want to make a motion to go back on agenda?
I will make a motion to go back onto the agenda and head into old business. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. All right, so a recap of old business, item number 6, which is now going to be item number 7, local landmark plaques. We're still waiting on the weather, I believe, for the Harlem Road School. End of that. Item number 7, which is going to be item number 8 now, is education plan, website, and presentations. I don't have an update on this. I think we wanted to keep this on as a general discussion point, if anyone has anything they'd like to add. Our website is updated, the terms are updated, the photos are updated.
Yeah, they left the old photos on.
Yeah, there's some old photos on, but that's good context.
Sure.
I like that. Okay. If no other board members have anything else to add,
I think that we need to consider updating the nomination, the local landmark nomination form that's online, because we've seen now 2 times when the applicant doesn't prepare like a period of significance.
Okay.
And I guess we need to stress architectural importance if that's one of the criteria that they're trying to meet on the application, because that was completely left off this time. So maybe if we could just
amend the landmark application.
local landmark application to include a section on period of significance, and then just look at it to make sure that it has enough for architectural significance. And maybe we use the language, identify the character defining features of the building.
You're pulling it up?
No, I don't have internet on here. That's why I keep using my phone, sorry.
That's okay. It's
find it.
it's actually right here.
It is right here.
There's an example of it right here.
Part of it's a fillable form, gentlemen, sorry.
This is the one we received today for 4467 Main Street.
Yeah, so we just need to add a section.
Detailing.
So maybe I can mark it up and then give it to James?
If you don't mind doing that, I would like that. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other changes, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Seconded by Kate Waterman Culpa. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, everyone.